My name is Kim Dorman, and I serve as the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Princeton Public Library. Welcome to this virtual session. We are thrilled to be able to offer this keynote as part of the Beyond the Concerts series from Princeton University Concerts tonight. We are delighted to be joined here with Deborah Amos and our very special guest, Dalia Sofer, author of Septembers of Shiraz. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. We do have the closed caption feature available that you can turn on for yourself. The program is being recorded and will be available after this evening. And so we hope that you'll feel welcome to share this with any and all who you think might be interested. Please put any questions that you have in our Q&A function, although I think it might be okay to also put them in the chat. And at the conclusion of the conversation, the speakers will be able to respond to the questions. I'm now going to introduce Dasha with Princeton University Concerts. She's the outreach coordinator there who will introduce this evening's program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's such a pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's book talk in partnership with the Princeton Public Library. These programs have been a very exciting way for us to provide some more context for the music and musicians on our season. Tonight's discussion is an extension of our Healing with Music series of conversations permeated by live performance. These events this season focus on exploring how civically engaged musicians respond to world crises through their art. Next on the series is pianist Igor Levit, an incredible musician who will join Deborah Amos to discuss how he uses his platform to work against anti-Semitism, right-wing political currents, climate change, and other causes. This will take place a week from Sunday in Richardson Auditorium. But tonight's book talk actually preludes the final event on the Healing with Music series in February, which features Iranian kamancha player Kayhan Kalhor. The event is titled Finding Home in the Music of Iran. Kayhan's story begins when he was a teenager fleeing Iran in the aftermath of the Iranian Revolution. So we were really excited when the Princeton Public Library team suggested that we read Dalia Sofer's The Septembers of Shiraz, which is also set in this period. It's an honor to have the author with us tonight, and along with our beloved Healing with Music moderator, Deborah Amos, to gain insight on this topic. And just a few words about them. Dalia Sofer is the author of the novels Man of My Time, which was a New York Times Editor's Choice and Notable Book of 2020, and The Septembers of Shiraz, also selected as a New York Times Notable Book of the Year, published in 16 countries, winner of the Sami Rohr Choice Award, finalist for the Jewish Book Award, and many, many other prizes. And Deb Amos is currently the Ferris Professor of Journalism in Residence at Princeton University, prior to which she spent much of her award-winning career as an international correspondent at National Public Radio with a focus on reporting on the Middle East. Following the discussion, I hope you all join in on the conversation, submitting your questions to Dalia and Deb. But without further ado, let's get this going. So Dalia and Deb, thank you again so much for being with us, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And welcome to this Princeton Library series with Dalia Sofer. We're here to talk about her terrific book, The Septembers of Shiraz. A little bit of context: the Iranian Revolution began as a popular uprising, resulting in the toppling of the monarchy in 1979 and the establishment of an Islamic Republic. The family in this book is swept up in the chaos and the cruelty of that aftermath. Isaac Amin is a rare gem dealer. He's arrested at work and thrown into prison. For his family, he essentially disappeared. And they set off on a feverish search for him. So I'm going to start with this, Dalia. Why did you write this book?
Well, first of all, hello, and thanks again for having me. Why did I write this book? I wanted to write the story of a man who's wrongly imprisoned in those immediate years after the revolution, and to portray how his life falls apart bit by bit. Because he's in an extreme situation, he is suddenly stripped of his daily routines and habits and ways of being, and he has no choice but to look inward and examine his life and examine the choices he has made and the life he has lived and the values he has lived by. At the same time, I wanted to place this man in a larger social and historical context, and to sort of weave in the story of a nation within the story of this man. I think what really drives me, probably in all my work, it's true of the second novel and what I'm working on now, it's sort of this, I guess, fascination with how history, or what later becomes known as history, affects individuals, and how individuals conversely affect the course of history through their actions and behaviors and decisions.
How much of this is your own story?
It's partly inspired by my own story. So I was born in Tehran. I was a small child during the Islamic Revolution, and my father was imprisoned. At the same time, it is fictionalized. So there are, I researched a lot and I read a lot. So it's definitely inspired by my personal story, but I try to widen the lens, if you like, and include a lot more.
Why this period in Iran? It was so interesting for me to read it because we knew about it, we read about the arrests, we knew about the turmoil and the brutality, but this is such a beautifully written personal story about a particular family. But this part of Iranian history is really not known from the inside. That's why I thought this was such a great book. And obviously, that's why it's a bestseller, because I'm not the only one who felt that way about it.
I think that period, the immediate aftermath of the revolution, was so well, it's very charged for me. As we just said, it's quite personal. But at the same time, I think just objectively, it's just full of the entirety of human drama, if you like. I mean, there is the way it began with just tremendous hope and solidarity and love, as such movements can begin. And at the same time, it contains disillusionment, betrayal, corruption, and tremendous violence, as we have seen. So it's just a period that's really charged for me, that has multitudes. And I've researched quite a bit about it because I am so interested in it. So there is a historian, Ervand Abrahamian, who has written a book called Tortured Confessions. And he has called it, those immediate years, the reign of terror, or Iran's reign of terror. And that's the period that he dates to the middle of 1981. And that sort of legalized the use of force against prisoners, these sort of confessions and recantations that are quite staged, they're quite theatrical. So this is another aspect that really fascinates me, is this sort of the coldness with which such measures are handled, the calculation. It's not this chaotic, crazy, place, though it can be. It's that kind of complexity that has driven me to it. And in fact, the second book is from the point of view of a revolutionary who ends up being a state interrogator. And so I kind of wanted to enter it from the other side and to live it in that psyche, if you like. So yeah, it's a period that's very charged.
So Isaac is your major character.
Yeah.
He's a wealthy man. He's a gem dealer. Why him? Why did you create this character? Why was he the driver of the narrative?
Again, with this book, part of it is personal. He resembles somewhat my father, though not entirely. He's fictionalized. But he is an ambiguous man. So he is what we may consider a good man, but he is not faultless either. So he's someone who starts off idealistic. He was a poet, but then he compromises because he wants a more lucrative life, career. So he trades that for gemology, which is still somewhat creative and is concerned with beauty and so on, but it's not his first love, let's say. And the more his own life becomes imperfect, the more he focuses on the perfection of his work, and he's sort of looking for this perfect stone, the diamond, which he finds, but he finds that no one is worthy of it, so he remains uncut. But in prison, sort of he changes in prison, so his perspective changes. He starts to see, he connects with people in a different way. He starts to see, to value the creative act itself. For example, his cellmate is making a wooden clog for his daughter, and it's not very aesthetically pleasing, but he just starts to value different things while he's imprisoned, and he start connecting with people in a different way. So I wanted to show a character that's ambiguous, and also he is somebody who looked the other way. I mean, the Shah's regime had a lot of injustices, and so he was living his life. You could say he didn't harm anybody directly, but he looked the other way. He was benefiting from a system that was also corrupt. So he's not faultless in that way. And so he begins to see that he was complicit in some ways. And also the fact remains that he gets out of jail partly by buying his way out, which again, he understands the moral complexity of such a decision, but it's his last resort, and he does it. So I wanted a morally ambiguous character, one that we would consider good, but again, is not perfect. So.
And also there's a part of him that is really interesting. He understands in jail that his relationship to his wife has kind of degraded over the years. Maybe his moral ambiguity is part of the reason, maybe the looking away is part of the reason, but that reevaluation of his relationship kind of stands in for all the ways that he didn't really pay attention to what was happening under the Shah, and that he didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Their relationship has been sort of falling apart, and they're not on both their sides, on both sides, and they're not paying attention. And I think it gets to a point where, as the external pillars are falling apart, they can't look away anymore. So they have to also examine what's happening between them. And yeah, he has become sort of preoccupied with his status and with his building. And she too has become preoccupied with her objects, the things that she has surrounded herself with. So they've lost their way a little bit, and they kind of find their way back to each other as the book unfolds.
Isaac Amin is Jewish, but you don't really make much of that. Why?
Yeah, I mean, he's Jewish. I wanted to sort of shed light on the history of Iranian Jews. They've been there for a long time, since the time of Cyrus. So I wanted to sort of put that forward. At the same time, this is not like a Jewish persecution story, because that's not how the revolution unfolded. It affected everybody. So people from different backgrounds, different political views, different socioeconomic backgrounds, everyone was affected, which is why I placed Isaac in a communal jail, where he is surrounded by all kinds of people, a Marxist, an Armenian Christian. I mean, he is surrounded by a revolutionary. So yeah, I wanted him to be one of many.
Yeah, and there's still Jews in Iran today. So I think some of them are even in the parliament.
There's one in parliament. I think they have to have one representative. There are Jews. I mean, the exact numbers are vague, but it's estimated somewhere around 8,000 to 10,000. Before the revolution, they were estimated to be about 80,000 to 100,000. So it's quite a decrease, but at the same time, it's the highest number in the Middle East. So
Correct, correct. So I want to also talk about the Armenian Christian. He's a pianist. He is very good at what he does. Isaac knows him. It's terrifying what happens to him. Why do you think that? Why did you think that he was picked out? And how many stories are like his?
Yeah, I mean, there was, especially in those early years, but probably still now too, there is a bit of randomness to who was picked out. So it just so happened that that night he's rounded up along with a bunch of others, and also he was a very or a close or somewhat close acquaintance of the Shah. So he had that kind of connection. So yeah, he was sort of, high, like his number was ahead in line, I guess. Yeah.
But Isaac also had a relationship. He made a necklace for the Shah's wife, and it wasn't that the piano player was known to have played for the Shah, and Isaac's making that necklace was not known to his jailers. Was that the difference between the two of them?
Yeah, Isaac's connection was not known, and the housekeeper's son at the end threatens to make it known. But yeah, I mean, small things like that could be rather incriminating. I mean, to tell you a personal story, when they came to search our house, my father happened to have, I don't know why he did this, but he had a collection of Time magazines. He didn't throw them out. So he just had hundreds sitting there. And so they picked one that had the Shah's picture on the cover, one of hundreds. But it was sort of like this kind of bizarre, evidence. So such things could be at that time quite incriminating.
So it's the randomness of it that was so terrifying.
Yes, yes.
I want to talk a little bit, and I hope you will, about the relationship between the house cleaner who had known the family for years, had worked with them for years, and the relationship with her son, who clearly is a revolutionary. He embraced the idea of the revolution. It was, for him, it was almost class warfare. Can you talk about the two of them, and what was your idea about fully portraying the two of them?
Yeah, I mean, the revolution, like any kind of ideological schism, can break up families or friendships. So this happens at least for a time between the mother, the housekeeper, and her son. Both of them work for the family. So the mother works at home, the son works in the office for Isaac. So the son becomes quite radical, and he stops viewing this family, the Amin family, as he loses touch with their humanity. At the same time, he's the one who sort of increases his mother's awareness of her diminished position in society, and has her sort of ask questions about, why is it like this? Why am I in this position? All of which are valid questions. So again, it's complex. It's not one thing or the other. Even though he has become quite brutal, he's ready to betray the family, even if Isaac dies. He, at the same time, is doing something which is raising his mother's consciousness of her class in society. So it's complicated. In the end, though, the mother, even though she shifts back and forth in her allegiances, she does stand by the family, and she helps them out. She's loyal to them in a moment where
it counts.
Yeah. So.
And how often do you think that happened? Is there any way to know how many Iranians were arrested in that period? And were there some who, maybe had sons, or maybe had some relationship with the revolution, but rethought it and actually helped some people get out?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't have any statistics on that. I don't know. I'm sure it did happen, because yeah, people shift positions as they do anywhere, right? Like something seems great, and then you see all the faults in it and what it's doing to humans. So you may reconsider or recalibrate in any case. So yeah, but I don't know. I don't have numbers.
I wonder if anybody really does.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the
I
question.
wanted to ask about how surprising were these tactics at the time? I mean, do you think Iranians were prepared? It was a popular uprising. You know, people wanted change. The Shah was brutal. There was torture. Yes, women didn't have to wear hijab. You know, elite women, you know, dressed like Westerners. But that wasn't everywhere. And I wondered if Iranians were surprised by what happened.
I think many Iranians were surprised because they weren't paying attention. But it had been brewing for a couple of decades at least, if not more. And there had been outbreaks, and there had been movements, and there had been writings, there had been discontent. But you know, people were just sort of living their life, and during the Shah years, especially in the 60s and 70s, as he made, you know, he modernized so much, and some segments of the population, their lives really improved in the more urban areas. So, and at the same time, this was creating great inequity throughout the country. So there was that issue. And of course, also the question of religion, you know, the term with, I guess they've translated it as West toxification, this sort of disease of being obsessed with the West. For many people, it was sort of going against their grain. Like, why is there this fascination with this other way of living and complete disregard for, you know, one's own culture? So there were a lot of questions that were being asked for a long time. At the same time, I think a lot of people were surprised because nobody was really expecting it to erupt as it did.
But I meant more the Khomeini takeover. As
Yeah.
I said, this was popular. People wanted a revolution. People came to the streets. They cheered when he arrived from France. I remember seeing those pictures. It was really something. And he was able to talk to Iranians in a way that no one had done before. It was kind of the social media of its time. There were cassettes that were sent into the country. Everybody listened to them. He arrives, and you know, it turns brutal very quickly. And that's my question. Were Iranians surprised that they traded in essentially one dictator for another one?
I think a lot of them were. I believe what happened really is that a lot of people joined forces. So there were so many different factions that just wanted the Shah gone.
Gone.
And it occurred to them, well, if we all join forces, we all know we want this, and then we'll figure it out later, like what we're going to do afterward. So they all got behind this because, as you're mentioning, Khomeini had great charisma. He was really inspiring people. And yes, there were these tapes that were circulating. It really was. He was viral.
Yes, he was.
So I think people were just taken with him as this figurehead of this movement, and they did not expect that it was going to, or at least some people did not expect that it was going to turn out that way.
Yeah, and as people started to go to jail, at that point, you really couldn't do much about it.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the problem with the post-revolution.
Yeah, and I mean, they were getting rid of their own, I mean, people who had been revolutionaries, but who were not agreeing with the way they wanted to do things. So they were getting rid of their own as well as those who had been against them.
I'm going to ask a few more questions. I want to say to our audience, if you would like to ask your own questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will let you ask questions after a couple more minutes, because I have a couple more to ask. That time, that period is, drilled into the minds of many Iranians. And I've heard it said that Iranians don't want another revolution. Yes, they do protest in the streets, but that one was so searing, so brutal, that it's like, okay, we're done with revolution. We'd like evolution, please. That is hard to do. But another revolution is too high a price to pay because they know what the price was last time. I wondered if you agreed with that, if you think that most Iranians are willing to challenge the government, but not willing to do what they did in the pre-79 period.
I mean, I'll preface that by saying I don't know for sure. I haven't been back, so I don't want to speak on behalf of people who are there. From what I observe, I sense that they've risen up many times since then. There was, I mean, more recently in 2009 after the election, and of course 2 years ago with Mahsa Amini and what happened with the women's movement, which took a lot of courage for people to do the things that they did, especially women, but also men. The problem is that they get sort of beaten down every time. So I guess you're asking how far are they willing to go? Yeah, I don't know. Though many have lost their lives along the way. So some people have been willing to go. I think, I mean, maybe I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, but the Shah also made a decision at that point to not crack down too much. He was sort of having a sort of morality crisis of conscience of his own. And he decided to not just, I mean, a lot of people were killed during the revolution, but he could have done more probably, but he left, he escaped. So maybe it's also how, at what point the resistance of the state is frayed enough for people to be able to push further. I don't know.
Although the protests seem to be more on the side of evolution rather than revolution. I mean, the demands in 2009 and even the ones today are not calling for the end of the regime, but calling for some changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think some people would like
a
change of regime, probably not everyone. I don't know. And I mean, it's also true that a lot of people were born after that period. So maybe it's even hard to envision something else. If that's all you've known, maybe, I don't know. I don't know.
Yes, because the last time I was there was in 2014. Okay. And my sense of people there is they'd learned to live with the regime. In North Tehran, people just did what they wanted.
Yeah.
You could go to restaurants, you could go skiing. You had to, all of a sudden, hijabs got looser. And my sense in 2014, and maybe it's changed now, is, okay, yes, the mullahs are in charge, but we will live our lives. We will play music at home. We will get Time magazine, and we'll get along as best we can.
Yeah, and that was probably a kind of brighter period too. There was a lot of optimism in 2014, 2015.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah, there was the nuclear deal. There was this kind of opening somehow. So I think a lot of people were feeling more optimistic. And there is this whole double life there too, where you have the official life and then the underground life, where the real stuff happens. So the real theater is underground, and like everything, the real art is underground. So everything is sort of this double life. And so maybe people have also gotten used to living this double life.
Why do you think the hijab is such a symbol? It was, when Khomeini came back, one of the first, edicts was that women had to cover up, and that is the source of the protest today. Why do you think that is? And why does the regime just adamantly refuse to change that rule, the rule of that women must wear head coverings? Why is it so symbolic for them?
It's a tool, it's another tool of control, I think. So it's a visible tool of control. And in fact, since what happened, since the Mahsa Amini's death and the revolts, they're cracking down more. They've brought down the morality police. They've strengthened the laws so that now any establishment that caters, although they don't always observe it because women are still walking around without the hijab, or proper hijab. But I view it as another tool of control, and especially control of women. But I mean, it does also have religious connotations in that, I mean, properly, according to the religion, women should cover up. So I think it's also kind of a way to impose this, or to remind people of the system that they are living under.
Why do you think that this book is so popular? It's kind of amazing how many places how many languages it's been translated into. It's a bestseller. Middle East books don't do that well in the public. What do you think you touched, if you can be reflective of your own work, that made this book so popular?
I'm not sure that I can answer that. What I hope is that I captured complexity, which is always what I want to do. That or at least what I attempted to do, was to not shy away from the brutality, but also not forget the moments of beauty. And also not forget that everyone is complicated, and everyone, even his jailer, right, his interrogator, is complicated. So everyone is coming with their own experience and worldview. So I think what I tried to do was capture complexity.
Yes, and often even in the press here, the Middle East is not portrayed as a complex place, grays and instead of all black and whites. I mean, that's why I liked it. I've been to Iran many times, so I didn't know anything about that period, not like you wrote it, so intimate with characters, and the jail scenes are just extraordinary.
Thank you.
Conversations between the interrogators and as you say, it's so random who gets killed, who doesn't make it out. We do have questions, lots of them, from the audience. I'm going to ask you one only because it's on the top of the list and it's an easy answer. Could you please repeat the name of the book that you mentioned at the beginning, something about torture?
Oh, Tortured Confessions by Ervand Abrahamian.
Mm-hmm. And it's about this period as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So the book discussed in book discussions.
Sorry, it's a scholarly book. It's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
So here's the next one. In book discussions last week, we couldn't all come to a consensus on how much she knew what she was doing when she stole from her friend's father's documents, which had targeted prisoners' names on them and buried them in the yard. It ended up that she did pretty much allow for her uncle to get out without being in prison. Could you speak to the daughter as a character? Is she you? How did you, as an author, think about her motive?
She's not me. I mean, again, there are some parts, perhaps, of me, but I did not steal files. I was not that brave. What is the question? What were the motives?
What was her motives? Why did you put her in there?
Well, why did I put the daughter in there? I mean, the daughter is there. All the four characters are there because I wanted to kind of show how this experience is being lived by four different individuals in one family. So we have these sort of 4 points of view. And she's coming to it, she's 9, so she's coming to it from a very sort of obviously childlike point of view and experience. And in that moment where she takes the files, there's kind of magical thinking that perhaps if she does this, she can affect the course of events. I don't make it clear whether, that actually saved the uncle, because we don't know, it's just everything's are random. So, but it is this moment of, I wanted to give her this moment of magical thinking and this moment of thinking that she has control over things, but also panicking because her name ends up on a list when her friend's father decides to interrogate the girls. Or the friend spares her. Her name could have ended up on the list.
On that list.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that whole section of the book is her friend from school, all of a sudden, she's the daughter, her friend is the daughter of someone who now has enormous power. He's pro-revolution, he moves up the class line, he's on the other side of her dad. And was that just a vehicle for explaining how these things happen, that, your next door neighbor could become somebody who could jail you, who could kill you, who could turn you in, and you just didn't know who it was going to be?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to do, is this sense of precariousness. I mean, I do recall this from my own childhood, where suddenly our neighbors were different, and we would see, people who were Revolutionary Guards, etc., who were just next door. And it's sort of, it's quite a shift, and you don't know what's going to happen next. So it was to capture that kind of uncertainty.
So how long were you there where you could observe those things?
Well, we left in late 82, in September of 82. So revolution happened roughly in late 78. So, quite 4 years, a long enough time, and a very sort of crazy time a full time.
Yeah. So you were already wearing hijab in school by then?
Yes, we had started to wear a hijab in school.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember how you felt about that?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that it was just very odd because we did not wear it before, and suddenly we did. And it was a strange way I found it restrictive in heat. Yeah, it just was a different way of being that we were not used to.
Mm-hmm. And imposed on all of you at the same time.
Yes. Anybody above the age of, I believe at the time it was the age of 9. I can't remember exactly, but it was, I think, 9 had to wear it. Yeah.
And then you had to figure out how to wear it.
You had to figure out how to wear it, how to sort of move with it, how to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the interesting part for me in 2014, that the rules had just changed so much that people would, the game was one bobby pin right on the top, so it would flow.
Yeah, I mean, it looks nothing like it did in the early years of the revolution. It was very strict at that time, and it was all mostly like dark and, navy and black and gray. And then, now it's just quite fashionable and yeah.
Yes, I know. It means that you don't have to wash your hair as often, because
It's true. You can have many bad hair days. No one
Exactly.
cares.
And I remember people telling me that, because you had to dress in black, you could go to work in your gym clothes or your pajamas if you wanted to.
Well, yeah, because you would just put this sort of what they called manteau on top of it, like this sort of loose coat, and it didn't matter what you wore underneath. Yeah, I mean, there were some
benefits
to it.
Yes, and people said, if we ever don't have to do this anymore, we're all going to have to lose some weight, because nobody cared.
Right, that's true. That's exactly right.
Let me take another question, and that is, and hopefully I can pronounce this, Dalia, do you know who Kayhan Kalhor is? And if so, can you give us some perspectives on what he means to the arts in Iran?
God, I mean, I've certainly have heard of Kayhan Kalhor. I can't speak about. I think you could probably do that much better than I could. And Deborah, I think you've met him and have spoken to him. Have you?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay. So I got that wrong. But yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that.
I know you haven't been. Did you ever go back?
I have not been back. Yeah,
Okay.
I would love to go back, but I have not been back.
Yeah, me too, but I don't think I can now. They don't let journalists in. They used to, but they don't now.
Yeah, now is not a good time.
Correct. Okay, here is another question from the audience. Could you tell us a bit about your writing process? I read the Septembers when I read the Septembers when it came out, and I was really taken with the beauty and the fluidity of your writing, hoping to see a new book by you soon. I think that that's already true. I'm looking forward to read your new book, but can't help but wonder why it took you so long.
So I imagine the person who asked the question is asking about Man of My Time, probably. It took long because many things happened. Certain life events happened, and also I spent many years working on another novel that for me didn't really come together in the end. So I left that one, and Man of My Time kind of came to me. I think a lot of the work that I had done on that book got distilled into Man of My Time. And yeah, sometimes these things happen. So
So if you can address the writing process, so you start one, it doesn't kind of work out, and then you do something else?
if I come to the conclusion that it's not cohesive and not quite there, then yeah. But you just follow. Like Man of My Time started, I was still working on that one, and Man of My Time, this voice kept coming to me, this man's voice, the person who ended up being the interrogator. And it was quite belligerent and a little bit angry. And
It just intruded on your thoughts?
yeah, it did. It really did. It was a summer afternoon. I remember it very well. It was August. I myself was feeling a little bit, unhappy. And I just sat with it and went with it. And that one happened in 2 years, so it's just sort of, you don't know where these things come from always, and just following it.
Is it because those jail scenes are so vivid that you needed to explore the other side of that? Because those two were human beings, and God knows what happened to them. I mean, I think some of them probably came to the same fate as some of those people in jail, because when a revolution goes that brutal, you don't know when you're going to go.
Yeah.
And was that your motivation, to just look at it from that side and how they did?
Yes, partly that. I just wanted to sort of live this other psyche. I also felt that, I mean, and this is not to take away from these real experiences, but I felt that there is a whole sort of narrative and a whole almost industry that's on this narrative of the persecution of people, which is true, and it doesn't take away from the truth of it. But I wanted to see how someone from that side who believed in this at some point in their life views this whole other narrative. And he's an ambiguous character, because he changes his ways along the way. He can't keep doing what he's doing. And yeah, he becomes a self-interrogator in a way in the book.
Wow. Here's a question that you may not answer. Maybe we can figure out another way to ask it. Can you say something about, no, here it is, being co-sponsored by the public library and this project on the healing power of music. We have a Iranian musician coming in February. And the question is, what's the musical aspect of the novel? And that's a hard one to answer. But what's interesting about the musician who's coming in February is he plays an ancient musical instrument, the Comanche. And I wondered if you can talk a little bit about Iran and music. I mean, he is, when you ask him about, he teaches young people how to play this, and you ask, well, how does the religious establishment feel about what you're doing? And he said, they don't like music, period. They just don't. And I wondered if you noticed that that was a transition when the revolution came. Did Iranians keep playing music at home? What did they think about the past? I mean, this is a really interesting instrument. It essentially is the precursor of the violin, of the lute, of all kinds of things, and it's still played in Iran today, despite the disapproval of the religious establishment. Can you talk a little bit about the role of music in Iran?
I mean, the music, I mean, the arts have a great place in Iranian culture, music included, of course. I think certainly when the revolution first happened, again, they were trying to control people's expressions or ways of expression, and to ban music is one way to do that. It's not, I don't believe classical Iranian music and I'm quite sure it's not banned anymore. But everything is controlled. I guess there is a way that they want to control emotion, they want to control expression. And any society that starts to control or restrict artistic expression, I think, is a society that's losing touch with its own humanity. And so I think that is what's happened as well with music. Poetry has a great place in Iranian culture. Visual arts have a great place in Iranian culture. And all of these things continue to exist and people are practicing them, but perhaps less openly. And I'm sure in terms of music, Mr. Kalhor can speak more thoroughly about it.
And so what's interesting about Tehran is on Fridays, everybody goes to art galleries.
Yeah.
And there are plays and there are fashion designers. And you're right, there are poets. So we don't see that from the outside. We don't see how much art plays a role in the lives of Iranians.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, well, because everybody just focuses on politics, and sort of what we see from the outside. Yeah, but it is very much part of the culture. Yeah, my man of my time has a lot more to do. I wanted to sort of explore the artistic evolution of the country in that book a bit more. Yeah, it is very much part of the culture.
Here's the thing. I just now realized that Kayhan Kalhor, I do know who that is because he's coming to Princeton.
Yeah, that's what I thought you may have.
Because I'm focused on the book and you, and I saw it and I went, I don't know who that is, but of course I do. And he's very wonderfully interesting about, the beginnings of this instrument. It's, a bunch of guys who are out hunting one day and they have this string, one string, and somebody says, because they are using, bows and arrows, let's see what happens if we play it with, the bow. And it's like, oh, look, that was great. And so that's, as he explains it, that's the beginning of what happens. And he's beautiful. He plays with the Yo-Yo Ma East-West Orchestra. And still, he's got family in Tehran, and he is a music teacher. Yes, I do know who that is. I just wanted to go back and say, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm way too focused on Isaac.
Yeah.
Here's another question from our audience. I see quite a few parallels between the Iranian Revolution you're describing and the Cultural Revolution in China, particularly as individuals like Isaac are affected. Could you address this?
Oh, the parallels between, I mean, I think, again, it's any kind of revolution. It's trying to create a whole new way of being, erase what has existed before, and to control people. And I think that's true. That's true of what happened in China as well. I haven't studied that revolution that closely, so I don't want to draw too many specific parallels. But yeah, I'm sure that's true.
you know, look, neither do I, but the one thing that always stands out is the Cultural Revolution, where elites were sent to the countryside, people, you know, were humiliated with dunce caps. Um, there was another way of doing it in this revolution, correct? That nobody got sent to the countryside, but in the early days of the revolution, many of the elites, North Tehran was targeted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were either imprisoned or they ran away. So there was definite targeting of elites, intellectuals, or people who had profited financially. Um, it was really like topsy-turvy, like those who had been at the bottom were now on the top, and the others had either left or were imprisoned. So yeah, and you know, there was a whole effort to re-educate people in terms of their history, to sort of erase certain parts of history, to sort of start at year zero, you know. And that is a common goal of many revolutions.
Except it didn't work with a lot of Iranians.
Yeah, no, it didn't work.
Talk a bit about the Iranian exile community. Do you still feel part of Iran? Do you keep up? Do you identify with other exiles? How does that work I mean, that's what you've been writing about. Your novels are reference to your experiences and your heritage. How does that work?
I think it's really different for different people. Some people are still very connected, others have moved on. There's a whole new generation that is very minimally connected. It varies for people. I've felt connected. I would like to go back. I haven't been able to. And you know, I still listen to Tehran radio once in a while, and I get, you know, the news straight from there, or I'm listening to Tehran traffic, you know, while I'm getting ready in the morning, you know. So it's a kind of bizarre schizophrenic, and I don't do it all the time, but sometimes I just have that desire to feel what's happening there. So I think it varies for different people.
And I have an audience question, and I know you talked a bit about this, but could Dalia speak a bit about her background in relations to Iran, which you just did? When did she leave? Was that as hard for your family as it was for Isaac Amin and his wife as they get in their car, say goodbye to their housekeeper, say goodbye to their house, say goodbye to everything they had, and just drive away?
That part was very much true to life. Yeah, we just drove north to Tabriz and then met up with smugglers and crossed the mountains into Turkey.
Did you walk?
We were on horseback and we walked. Yeah.
Oh, so that part of the book comes straight from what happened to you.
That part, yeah. There was even a man in white. He was wearing a white suit, and it was, I think, his third time running away, and we're like, hello, the white suit. Maybe don't wear that next time.
You kind of stand out.
Yeah.
And you were a kid. And so, I don't know, did you ever dream about it? I mean, this is not an experience that, you were 9, 10?
Yeah.
When you left, impressionable enough to have memories of it, old enough to have memories of it. Did you spend years thinking about it? Were you afraid? Did you trust that your parents knew what they were doing?
I was afraid during the escape itself. And then afterward, I think something happens, which is probably a kind of self-protection mechanism where you put it away for, you know, during my teenage years, and I did not reconnect with it very much. And then it comes back. It comes back years later, and then it hits you. Yes, then it comes
And it
back.
becomes a source for your novel.
Yes, it can. Yeah.
Yeah. And my last question is this. You know, we are on the cusp of what could be a war in the Middle East. You know as well as I do that the Iranians retaliated against the Israelis. Now the Israelis say that they are going to retaliate back. In the community of exiles, do you talk about it? Do you worry about it? How do you face the news of what is happening in the Middle East?
With great anxiety, like everyone. But yeah, I mean, with great anxiety, I would say. Sorry, my cat is distracting me here. I think everyone's sort of holding their breath to see what's next. So I have a friend who goes to Iran quite often, so I get news from him, sort of in terms of what people are thinking there, and he tells me that
it's perfectly fine. You might as well let him do that.
He tells me that people are and people keep their sense of humor there. So he tells me that people are just like, why don't they do something already so we know what's coming?
The anticipation is worse than the action.
Yeah. And I know people in Israel who felt the same way when they were waiting for the attacks from Iran. So there is this just way that people are held sort of in captivity of these decisions that may or may not come.
And does this then set off another round of revolution? I sometimes think the Iranians the regime has been very clear, we don't want to have a war. We don't. And they have gone out of their way. And I often wonder if what they're worried about is being destabilized, that they know that there's a large group of people in the capital and in other places that would like to see some big changes, and an event like that could give them an opening. And I wondered if you thought that that was also true of the regime, that they know that they are vulnerable, and that's why they have been so keen on keeping the conflict much out of their backyard.
Yes, I think, I mean, again, I don't have any special knowledge into this, but
Neither do I.
But I think that they did not want to get directly involved, although they are involved in other ways, by supporting those who are involved. And I think they worry about that for sure. Yes.
Yeah, that's my sense. Dalia, we are out of time, and you have answered everybody's questions. I just want to thank you so much and say that the book is just terrific. And now I have to read the next one because I want to see from the other side. But I listened to you as an audiobook and it was just grand. I did it over the summer, so I'm just delighted to meet you. So thank you very much for this talk. And we had tons of questions. So that means that people are as interested as I am.
Thank you so much. And it was really a pleasure to talk to you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.